So it began in that way with a broken promise, but at the same time there was a legal case. I'm a lawyer, known as the Parsons Cause. To make it as brief and uncomplicated as I can. In the middle 1750s, we had 3 consecutive years of drought. Tobacco failed miserably. And as tobacco is our money, our economy of trade was suffering mightily. To complicate matters even further, heretofore, all of our public servants, our sheriffs and clerks and our clergy, because we have a state church, you know, the Church of England, they've all been paid salaries in tobacco. And in previous years, our clergy, especially, had received 16,000 pounds of tobacco per year as their salary. A gentleman's income. Tobacco historically sold for 2 pennies a pound. So, in effect, our clergy would be receiving somewhere in the neighborhood of 144 pounds a year. That's a good income. Because of the short crop, because of the drought, however, the price of tobacco tripled to 6 pence a pound. And the legislature, the House of Burgesses, realized rather quickly that if we paid those salaries at those prior rates, it would cripple us, ruin us. And so the House of Burgesses, this before I was actually a member, enacted a law called the 2 Penny Act, which decreed that for so long as this emergency lasts, our clergy and other public servants will be paid in money, not in tobacco, and they'll be paid at the rate of 2 pence per pound, which is what the rate of tobacco usually was. In other words, they were getting the same amount of money that they normally did. They were going to have to make some sacrifices, certainly, because of the bad economy, but everyone was going to have to. Well, the Reverend John Cam, commissary here at the College of William and Mary, believed that he and his fellow clergy were being cheated. And so he sailed back to England and he appealed before the king and the Privy Council, asking them to nullify or to veto the 2 Penny Act, which the king did. John Cam then sailed back here to Virginia, spread his happy news with his creatures, and they began to bring lawsuits in all of the counties against the sheriffs, because the sheriffs, after all, are our tax collectors. The first case that was heard was in Hanover County. I had been secured by Mr. Thomas Johnson, the sheriff there in Hanover County, to represent him. Now, mark you, it wasn't a case of whether Mr. Johnson wins or the Reverend Mowry wins. It was a question of how much is going to be awarded in damages, because the king had already made the decision for us. I found my gift that day. I railed against the clergy for more than an hour's time, painting such a bleak, ugly, dismal picture of them to the jury that the jury was not only disgusted, they were frightened out of their wits. Saying such things as, and I quote, "Gentlemen, we have heard a great deal of our reverend clergy with regard to their holy zeal and benevolence. But do they manifest that zeal in the name of religion by feeding the hungry or clothing the naked? Oh, no, gentlemen. Rather than feeding the hungry and clothing the naked, these rapacious harpies would, if their power were equal to their will, snatch from the hearth of their honest parishioner his last hoe cake, from the widow and her orphan child their last milk cow, the last bed, nay, gentlemen, the last blanket from the lying-in woman, great with child. They're using this courtroom for their counting house," and on and on. Well, the jury finally came back, very quickly came back, in fact, with damages in the amount of 1 penny. And the Reverend Mowry and all these other clergymen had been seeking 288 pounds. That set a precedent. The clergy quickly realized what miserable, disgusting creatures they were going to be portrayed as, so they began to drop their lawsuits. It was considered a great victory for the people, especially for the people of Virginia, against royal government. In the course of those words, I also said something that elicited a few cries of treason, including this one, and I quote, "Any king," and that was George II, "any king who would disallow an act of so salutary a nature," the 2 Penny Act, far from being the protector of his people, rather denigrates into a hard and cruel tyrant, and he thus forfeits all right to his subjects' obedience. That was the first time ever that anyone had dared to challenge the authority of the king to nullify laws that the people of Virginia had enacted for their own benefit and protection. And word went out like a wildfire. In fact, immediately following the verdict, I was picked up on the shoulders of a number of men and paraded electioneering style around the courtyard. The next year, I found myself elected for the first time into the House of Burgesses. And the people of Virginia will tell you that I am truly their champion, that if there's only one man in the capital city who will, upon whom they can rely to protect and defend the interests and the rights of the small farmer, it's Henry. So whereas, my friends, as you're in your travels about the city today, you find that I am intensely disliked in Williamsburg, fear nothing, throughout the rest of Virginia, I am wildly popular.